Hello, friends. The tour story of real life explained chapter by chapter breakdown of Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann, which dives deeper into each section of the book. It explores the historical context, key events, characters, and overarching themes. Part 1, The Marked Woman, chapters 1 to 5. Chapter 1, The Osage. Murders. In 1921, Anna Brown, a young Osage woman, is found dead under suspicious circumstances. Initially, her death is attributed to natural causes, but as more Osage people begin dying under similarly mysterious circumstances, the community grows alarmed. Anna's death begins a series of events that leads to the discovery of a conspiracy to kill Osage people in order to seize their oil wealth. This sets the stage for a chilling exploration of greed and murder. Chapter 2, The Osage People. The Osage people were forcibly relocated from their ancestral lands to Indian Territory in the 19th century. However, the Osage soon found that the land they had been given contained vast oil reserves, making them extraordinarily wealthy. By the early 1900s, the Osage had become some of the richest people in the world, with the headright system granting them the mineral rights to the land. However, the U.S. government did not trust Native Americans to manage their wealth and imposed a guardianship system. This system forced Osage people to surrender control of their finances to white guardians, who frequently took advantage of them. This exploitation set the stage for the events that followed. Chapter 3, The Reign of Terror begins. The first major death in what would become known as the Reign of Terror is Anna Brown's. Her murder is the catalyst that sets off a series of mysterious deaths among Osage families. The murders are carried out with cold precision, with victims poisoned, shot, or blown up. As the body count rises, suspicion grows in the Osage community, but local law enforcement is slow to act. The white guardians who have control over the Osage wealth become prime suspects, but their influence protects them from scrutiny. The authorities dismiss the deaths as accidents, and the Osage feel increasingly unsafe in their own land. Chapter 4, The Burkhart Family. The Burkhart family, including Molly Burkhart, an Osage woman married to a white man, Ernest Burkhart, becomes central to the investigation. Molly's family is targeted by the killers. Her sister, her mother, and other relatives are all murdered in a series of suspicious deaths. Ernest's involvement in the murders is hidden at first, but his position in the family and his proximity to the killings become key to uncovering the conspiracy. The intricate web of deceit and murder is driven by a desire for the Burkhart family's wealth. The killers specifically target Molly's family members in an attempt to gain control of their headrights. Chapter 5, The Silent Witnesses. As the murders continue, several Osage women, including Molly Burkhart, are left as widows and survivors. The Osage community begins to rally in search of justice, but the murderers are well hidden behind a veil of corruption. A pattern begins to emerge in the investigation, showing that the murders are part of a larger, coordinated plan by a group of conspirators who have married into Osage families and are systematically eliminating their relatives to gain access to their oil wealth. However, many witnesses are too scared to testify, and the killers continue to operate with impunity. Part 2, The Detective, Chapters 6 to 10. Chapter 6, The FBI Arrives. The case of the Osage murders finally attracts the attention of the federal government, and the newly formed Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, is called in. The agency, under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, is still in its infancy, and the Osage murders provide an early test of its capabilities. Tom White, an experienced agent, is tasked with investigating the murders. White is known for his quiet determination and skill in undercover work. His arrival marks the beginning of a focused and methodical investigation into the murders, although he faces considerable resistance from local authorities and the community. Chapter 7, Tom White's Investigation Agent. Tom White's team begins to investigate the murder systematically. They interview witnesses and gather evidence, slowly piecing together the extent of the conspiracy. Wyatt and his team begin to suspect that the murders are not random, but are part of a deliberate plan to steal Osage wealth through murder. One key aspect of the investigation is how they gain the trust of the Osage people, who are understandably wary of law enforcement due to past abuses. Wyatt and his team rely on local informants, including ranchers and other community members, to gather information. Chapter 8: The Undercover Operation. To infiltrate the conspiracy, Wyatt's team employs an undercover strategy. They send a trusted informant, John Ramsey, to gather intelligence on the suspects. Ramsey poses as a potential accomplice to the murderers and is able to gain their confidence. He learns about the intricate plans of the conspirators, including how they targeted Osage women by marrying them and then killing them to gain access to their head rights. Ramsey's information is crucial in understanding the scope of the conspiracy, and his bravery in working undercover gives the FBI the leverage they need to pursue the killers. Chapter 9: William Hale. The mastermind behind the Osage murders is revealed to be William Hale, a wealthy cattleman who has long been a figure of power in the Osage community. Hale had ingratiated himself with the Osage by posing as a benefactor and friend, but in reality, he was scheming to control their wealth. Hale used his influence to manipulate and marry into Osage families, including through his nephew, Ernest Burkhart, who married Molly Burkhart. Hale's plan was to slowly kill off the Osage, using his influence to acquire their wealth and head rights. His cold and calculating nature is revealed as the investigation deepens. Chapter 10: The Corruption of Power. As the FBI's investigation uncovers more details about Hale's role in the conspiracy, it becomes clear that the network of killers is much larger than initially thought. Hale's power and influence in the local community allowed him to avoid suspicion for years, and he used his connections with local law enforcement to protect himself. This chapter explores how the social and legal systems in place at the time allowed the killers to operate with impunity. The Osage murders are shown to be part of a broader problem of systemic corruption that allowed wealthy individuals to exploit vulnerable populations for profit. Part 3: The Trial and Aftermath, Chapters 11 to 15. Chapter 11: The Trial of William Hale. William Hale is arrested and charged with the murders of several Osage individuals. The trial, which takes place in the mid-1920s, is a major public event and captures the attention of the nation. Hale's defense team argues that he is a respectable businessman who is being falsely accused by the Osage people. However, the evidence against him is overwhelming. His role in the conspiracy is laid bare, and the details of the murders are presented in court. Hale's trial is a dramatic moment in the book, as it represents a victory for the Osage people and the FBI, but also highlights the weaknesses of the legal system that allowed many of the conspirators to avoid justice. Chapter 12: The Conviction of Hale. Despite his best efforts to avoid conviction, William Hale is ultimately found guilty of orchestrating the murders and is sentenced to life in prison. His nephew, Ernest Burkhart, also faces charges, though his sentence is much lighter. The trial represents a partial victory for the Osage, but it is bittersweet. While some justice is served, many of the individuals responsible for the murders are either acquitted or receive minimal punishment. The legal system's failure to deliver full justice leaves a lingering sense of injustice for the Osage community. Chapter 13: The Legacy of the Murders. While the trial provides some resolution, the emotional and psychological toll of the murders on the Osage community is lasting. Many of the Osage who were affected by the killings continue to live with the trauma of losing family members and seeing the system fail them. The murders also serve as a symbol of the broader exploitation of Native Americans, highlighting the ways in which systemic racism and greed have historically been used to oppress indigenous peoples. The Osage murders were a manifestation of a broader pattern of discrimination and injustice that Native Americans faced in the United States. Chapter 14: The FBI's transformation. The Osage murders case becomes a defining moment for the FBI, which uses the investigation to build its reputation as a national law enforcement agency. The case establishes the FBI's credibility in solving complex, high-profile criminal cases and solidifies its role in handling major investigations. The case is often cited as one of the earliest examples of the FBI's ability to conduct sophisticated investigations, including undercover work and the use of forensic techniques. This case would influence the FBI's future approach to criminal investigations. Chapter 15. The Osage Nation Struggles. Despite the conviction of some of the conspirators, the Osage people continue to suffer. Many of the Osage who lost family members in the murders never fully recover from the emotional trauma. The Osage Nation's fight for justice is long and difficult, and the case of the Osage murders serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of Native American communities in the face of exploitation and systemic racism. The book ends with a reflection on the legacy of the murders and the continuing struggles of the Osage people. Themes explored in the book: greed and corruption. The entire plot of the book revolves around the corrupting influence of wealth, as the Osage murders were committed out of a desire for the oil riches that the Osage controlled. The book shows how greed can turn seemingly ordinary people into monsters. Racism and injustice. Killers of the Flower Moon is a powerful critique of the systemic racism that Native Americans faced in the early 20th century. The Osage were targeted because they were indigenous, and the legal and societal structures at the time allowed their exploitation and murder. The failure of the legal system. The story highlights the failures of the U.S. justice system, particularly how the legal system allowed the conspirators to operate unchecked for so long. The book is critical of how the system is biased and often fails to protect marginalized communities. The emergence of the FBI. This case is an important milestone in the development of the FBI, showing how the agency grew from a small, untested force into a powerful national investigative body capable of taking on complex cases. This chapter-by-chapter breakdown provides a more detailed view of Killers of the Flower Moon and explore how the narrative unfolds. The case of the Osage murders is not just a story of individual crimes, but a reflection of broader societal issues such as greed, exploitation, and systemic injustice. Thanks for listening.